It's time for the history of Harley Quinn. Even a lot of casual Batman fans are aware that she doesn't come from the comics. She comes from the excellent Batman, the animated series. Interestingly, the name Harley Quinn itself was actually first coined in 1939 by the Irish writer James Joyce, as a pun on the name Harlequin. Harlequin was a standard character for Italian comedy in the late 1500s. Lighthearted, clever, and often antagonistic to authority. He was incredibly gifted at aerobics due to a deal made with a devil-like character. It could be argued that Harley Quinn shares those qualities. That's where the name comes from, but what about the character herself? Well, hang on to something, because it's about to get weird. There's an old American soap opera. You might have heard of it, Days of Our Lives. You know the one, it's like Sands Through the Hourglass one? In a dream sequence on the show, a quirky character called Calliope Jones had a dream sequence in which she wore a motley. That's just a fancy word for a jester's costume. The actress Arlene Sorkin went to college with a fellow called Paul Dini, and they'd remained friends ever since. Paul Dini worked on Batman the animated series, and at one point they needed Joker to pop out of a cake for story reasons. They decided that wasn't something Joker would do, so they invented a female character to do it for him instead. They knew the character had to be clown themed and that it had to be a female, because I guess males didn't jump out of cakes back then. Paul remembered that one dream sequence scene his friend Arlene performed on Days of Our Lives and reached out to her regarding the Harley Quinn role, even inviting her to voice the character which she had inspired. Arlene would go on to voice Harley Quinn for years, until she stepped down and the role was taken over by the always amazing Tara Strong. She was also portrayed in the film by Margot Robbie, whose choice to occasionally use Harley's accent was a stroke of genius, thereby relaying Harley's internal struggle for control over herself. The in-universe origins of Harley Quinn. There once lived a young girl named Harleen Quinzel, because people in comics have weird names. Her family was, shall we say, dysfunctional. In order to understand her family, she became a psychiatrist. During the course of her psychiatry work, she was eventually stationed at Arkham Asylum, which is where all the Gotham's most deadly criminals end up because Batman cares more about his rogues gallery than the citizens of Gotham. While she was there, she met the most fascinating man, a man named Joker, and not the Joker. This man wasn't evil. He was just in severe emotional pain. She was wrong, of course. Joker was playing her like a fiddle. He'd met plenty of people like her before. People who pretended that they cared, but then just went home to their sad little apartments. Most of these apartments weren't much bigger than his cell, which made him wonder what crime they must have committed themselves. Every time Harley thought she was getting close to Joker, he'd begin mocking her. She eventually realized this, and one day she stood up to him. That was when the Joker fell in love with her. Not because he valued her, but because he saw a little of himself in her. Thinking she'd finally gotten through to the Joker, she formed a dangerous bond with him. He'd eventually talk her into helping him escape, offering to make her his partner. This was a lie though. He always viewed and treated her as a sidekick. She eventually realized that Joker had done her dirty, and she broke up with him and went her own way. Over time, she went from villain sidekick to villain to anti-hero to feminist icon. Although she doesn't really seem to understand how consent works, that can be explained by her traumatic childhood and subsequent relationship with Joker. What began as a one-off character designed for one of the male leads in a show has now become a strong character in her own right. Harley Quinn, when written well, is a complex mess of contradictions. She values not only her femininity, but also her thuggishness. She hates bullies, and yet her behavior can often accurately be described as toxic femininity. She has a genius-level IQ, but she doesn't really use it because she finds it boring. That makes sense. Say whatever you want about Harley Quinn, but one thing she's not is boring. That's all for me, guys, but until next time, love the geek. Peace.